أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم وصلى الله على رسوله الكريم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in New York or across the globe, wherever you hear my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is your purpose? What is my purpose? What is our purpose? Coming towards this conversation of tonight of finding our meaning and our sense of calling, we'll start with a bit of an introduction for a few minutes, and then we'll transition into a, hopefully inshallah, a dialogue and a workshop type of environment where we can actually try to show and see how can we add value to people's lives through the programming at the mosque, the Imam Bargah, the center. So having said that, there's a few things that we need to be mindful of and keep in mind. Number one, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create me? What is the guidance that the Quran al-Majid wal Furqan al-Hamid gives us? Number three, what do we learn from the lives of the Ahlul Bayt and their teachings with respect to what we should be doing with our lives and how we should be dedicating our lives? Number four, what do we learn from the lives of the scholars of Ahlul Bayt, the ulama? What did they dedicate their lives to, and what is it that we can learn from their dedication of their time and their efforts? And finally, how is it that our masjid, our Imam Bargah, our Husayniyah can fill the role and help people find what they're meant to do and what their strengths are? What is the unique gift or set of gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to each individual that we can use, that they can use to help humanity and help civilizations and help people at large? This is something that we'll try to look at, inshallah, in the brief moments we're together, and then we'll transition, inshallah, to the workshop format. Wherever you are, here in New York or across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, salam, sada salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, there's some points that I'm reiterating so that we make sure we understand what's going on. Number one is the verse, Inna dina indallahi al-Islam, or the portion of the Quran that tells us, verily the religion, not the religion, the way of life, not the way of life. The deen near Allah is Islam. And that is the same Islam that has been coming from Adam to Khatam. That is, every prophet has been pushing and saying that there is one religion, which is Islam. The first person who the Quran itself said was a Muslim was who? Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ahsan. Was the person, but there was no Islam as we think of it in today's day during Ibrahim's time. Meaning that that same religion that was being told from the beginning to the end was the same religion of Allah. Further than this, because Judaism in its time was the Islam of its time. Christianity in its time was the Islam of its time. Islam now, as we call it, is the final seal that Allah has sent for humanity, but before that there were other religions. Now we call one Judaism, now we call one Christianity, and there have been other names throughout times. So it's important for us to reflect on this. Number one. Number two, when you go to even Islam in that era of the Makki and the Madani period, the Meccan period and the Madani period, in terms of Makkah, as I mentioned, many of the shorter chapters are Makki. By the way, I should mention, Makki and Madani does not mean that it was revealed necessarily in Makkah geographically or in Medina geographically. This is a reference to the time period when it was revealed, prior to Hijrah or after Hijrah. Because there were some verses that were not revealed in Mecca directly, but they were part of the Meccan verses. And there were some verses that were not revealed in Medina as a city, but it was during that period. So it's important to keep these in mind. And there are disputed chapters that you will find, about 12 of them, that people have a difference of opinion of it's Makki or Madani. Now, based on this, in Mecca, what were the ahkam? If you go to the verses of Surah Fatiha, Surah Ikhlas, Surah Asr, all of these, for example, is Allah saying, this is how you do, this is namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, khums, tawalla, tabarra, all of these things? No. In fact, you will find in the 13 years that they were there in the Meccan period, Rasulullah was only telling people to say one thing, La ilaha illallah. In fact, you will not find any ahkam. In fact, the riwayat say there were no ahkam in Mecca except say La ilaha illallah in terms of your aqaid, number one. And number two, there was namaz. And that two namaz was not like, there was salah, not like our salah. Salah was 2 rakats in the morning, 2 rakats in the evening, that's it. It was a good deal. Because Allah at that time was just saying, just say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Then when they shifted to Medina, after 18 months, same thing, nothing. It was just salah in that form of 2 in the morning, 2 in the evening, that's it. But then the verses, two verses came together, 18 months after the migration to Medina. The first one was the one that was just a few days before Shahr Ramadan, which was Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. That, O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed on those who came before you, so that perhaps you will achieve taqwa. Why did Allah say perhaps? لَعَلَّكُمْ. Perhaps, meaning that it's not guaranteed. There are examples that you'll find during the time of Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen and the other Ahlul Bayt. One example is a man during the time of Rasulullah, he was in the month of Shahr Ramadan beating a person. And Rasulullah offered him in the middle of the day, he offered him a date, kujur. He said, eat this. He said, here, would you like one? He said, Ya Rasulullah, it's Shahr Ramadan, you know better than I do, it's for fasting. He said, you're fasting? He said, based on your actions, it doesn't look like you're fasting. Meaning, the idea is, fasting is just not staying away from food and water. That's a very small aspect. That's one dimension of the whole picture. But there's a much bigger picture of self-control there. So if fasting is making you a worse person, then maybe it's better that you don't fast. Fasting is supposed to make us more kind-hearted, more compassionate, more caring. Now, come to this. That is one verse. Another one was that came 18 months after they moved to Medina was the next verse, which came, they say, side by side. The fasting one that I just told you, and the other one, which is Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Where Allah says, Inna Allaha wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi. Right? Allah and His malaika send salawat on Rasulullah. So you, oh you believers, you also send salawat on Rasulullah. The principle being that, why did Allah emphasize this? The principle of this being that, look, human beings, if you do not give them the right role models, we will find our own role models. And those role models will be inadequate because they've not been established by Allah. So now come to this, Let's really get to the weeds of this, and then I'll transition into a discussion and inshallah workshop style format. What am I meant to do? What are you meant to do? What is our calling in life? And believe me, don't think this is just if you're young and you're 16 or you're 20 or 30, this is for you. I've had this conversation with people who are in their 70s and they found out in their 70s. Alhamdulillah, that's still good. There's an old saying, der ayat durust ayat, that better late than never. So you should try to maximize that moment. And believe me, if you have and you know your calling, you may find that your life gets extended because of your desire to fulfill what you're trying to fulfill within reason. And then other people will build on it. Why do I say this? Because oftentimes we tell our people and we tell people to pick your calling and what you should do with your life based on economics, for example. I was in Seattle and I was mentioning some of the names of like Jeff Bezos and or Bill Gates and the likes. And this brother, may Allah bless him, he asked in the Q&A session that, why in Muharram are you mentioning, because it was Muharram when I was there, why are you mentioning Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos? I was talking about Quran Ahlul Bayt also. But I said, brother, do you know, why are you here? He said, I'm here for work. I said, where do you work? He said, I work at Microsoft. I said, mashallah, somebody was able to pull you away. I said, where's your family from? He said, we're from New Jersey. I said, someone was able to pull you from New Jersey all the way 3,000 miles to the other side of the country, and it wasn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was some other entity. It was economic forces. And I'm not telling you that that's bad. I'm telling you the reality of our world. Is Allah, is the Kaaba able to pull us to Mecca? Do we move there physically? I mean, even I know there's been challenges geographically and politically that we maybe not been able to. Or Karbala. Karbala is beautiful to visit. But I haven't seen people move to Karbala yet. So people are saying, no, I'll visit, it's very nice, but I like my life in New York and New Jersey, life is good here. So you like Karbala, but only for a couple of weeks out of the year, not more than that. Because life can be difficult there, right? Similarly, when it comes to this, you have to be honest with what is controlling our life. And the one way that you can check this is if you want to know who controls you and whose slave you are, just look at who you are trying to impress. And answer that question in your own heart and mind and you'll get the answer. And that is the person or the entity or the institution that has real estate in your mind. So now come back to this. So our lives are governed by economics. So for example, many people say become a doctor or an engineer. Very noble, very good, fantastic. But that was often based on what were the viable opportunities in that time and space where people grew up for job prospects. So for example, if you were living 1,000 years ago, people maybe wouldn't say become a doctor and engineer. It wasn't perhaps as common. Or maybe they would say become a tabib or hakim, but they probably wouldn't say engineer. It wasn't as common. Or for example, if you fast forward to the world that we are going to, today many people are studying computer science and the likes, but with the AI revolution, many changes in jobs will take place. Not the least of which is medical and healthcare, in fact. There are algorithms right now that are changing the dynamics of how many. We'll still need physicians, don't get me wrong, but the amount of physicians that we'll need perhaps is not as many as we did in the past because of much work being automated. The same is true, for example, in engineering. The same is true in many facets of life. So the question remains, what makes you choose your calling? Is it just what was popular? You ask people in our communities 20 years ago or 30 years ago, 25 years ago, everyone was interested in the hot topic of that time. So people started majoring in, for example, management information systems. So that was some field that people said, this is a job opportunity. Today, people aren't always saying management information systems. They're finding computer science or AI or healthcare or something else. So what I'm trying to tell you is, don't just look at what is the job need of where you are right now, because that will change. The environment will change. You have to look 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. So it's important for us to keep these things in mind. And how do you understand these things? Well, ask those people who are either inventing the future or those people who are investing in the future. So you want to hear what is being said in Silicon Valley. You want to hear what the VCs are investing in Silicon Valley. You want to have conversations with Wall Street and understand what are the companies that they're investing in, what are the future of the industries that are coming down the pipeline. For example, you will find artificial intelligence, AI. You will find, for example, blockchain technology. You will find, for example, 5G telecommunications networks. You will find IoT, the Internet of Things. You will find a series of other types of technologies that are coming. Quantum computing, which is a major industry of the future. All of these things are really, really important. But you need to make sure you have a trajectory of not just what's needed right now, but what's needed down the road. Otherwise, you may end up doing something which you despise and you don't like. Another aspect of this which is very important to mention is, I haven't found it yet, but in the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt, I really looked to see what are the fields and the careers that the Ahlul Bayt recommended. And believe me, my whole mom's side of family, I have a lot of doctors in my family, but I didn't find any hadith that said, tell your kids to be a doctor. I didn't find it yet. If you found it, please let me know, and I'll let people know. But what is it that the Ahlul Bayt have highly encouraged, which is also includes medicine and engineering and all of those things, is actually entrepreneurship, which we'll talk about tomorrow, by the way. So what I'm saying is, actually, I'm not saying what you may be thinking I'm saying. Please try to understand what I'm trying to say. I'm actually trying to encourage you to become professionals, become doctors, become lawyers with ethics and in all careers, engineers, economists, whatever field you pick, go to the top of it, but also don't rule out doing entrepreneurship down the road. I have so many friends who've ended up picking this career, for example in healthcare, but they didn't realize, and they're telling me now that, we didn't realize we're going to be operating businesses now. And many of them are, which is great, alhamdulillah. But if you don't know how to do it, maybe we in the community can step up to help guide people in that domain. By the way, medicine is a very, very noble field. It's one of the best fields that you can do. You can help humanity out. So I highly recommend it. But do it for the right reasons. And I give this example that this happened in London, and I noticed this clear as day. Most of the parents who are from our community, same Indo-Pak community and Iraqi community, they were telling their kids, don't become a doctor, become a dentist. Why? Because you make more money as a dentist in a place like London, because of private practice. And so when the economic incentives change, the decisions also change. You have to understand that. Iqtasadiyat, as Shaykh Sadr wrote. Why did he write a whole book? One is called Falsafatuna, Our Philosophy, dense book, and another really dense book, Iqtisaduna, Our Economics. Why? Why did he spend this time writing these dense books? Because he understood how much philosophy and economics dictate our lives. A society moves from a community-based society to an individual-based society based on a philosopher by the name of Nietzsche and other philosophers who came after him. A society moves people from one part of the world to the other part of the world based on economics. In the future, the next 100 years are being called the Asian century. That is, the next development wave is going to be not perhaps in the United States, not perhaps in Europe, but perhaps in the likes of Korea, Japan, China, India, and these economies. And you need to be aware of what's going on to understand where is the world going, what is their culture, because their culture impacts our world. The same way American and European culture has been impacting the world for the last 100 years, 150 years. It's going to be a seismic shift. Now, coming to this, what are you meant to do, and why is this so important as I draw to this chapter concluding? There are certain things that Allah may have given you as a gift. For some people, it's the ability to speak. For some people, it's the ability to organize events. For some people, it's the ability to get people together. For other people, it's to lead. For other people, it's something else. And it's very important, whether you choose sports or economics or something otherwise, that you learn something that is of your benefit. I'll give you my own personal example. And I've been very open about this because there's a lot of work that our communities need to do. One example is mental health. And I mentioned a book to you the other night, if you remember. It was called A First-Rate Madness by Dr. Nasim Ghami, who is the head of psychiatry at Tufts University. And he said, look, some of the most successful presidents in the history of America, they were successful not in spite of, but because of their mental health challenges, as people would call it, because it's a double-edged sword. So he found that certain presidents, like he mentioned JFK, Roosevelt, and many others, it was the difficulties in their life that actually, of what was going on in their brain, that actually helped them to be very good leaders, especially in times of difficulty. For example, when you go through difficulty, don't think that it's something to demoralize you. Example, there's a book called Leadership in Turbulent Times. It's about 4 presidents who were leaders of America in difficult times. The likes of Abraham Lincoln, the likes of Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, as well as the likes of Lyndon B. Johnson, both Roosevelts and Lyndon B. Johnson. And they said they all had difficult lives which helped them become better leaders. Example, Roosevelt, the first one, Teddy Roosevelt, he has a quote, a lecture that I recommend that you read. Now, keep in mind, I'm saying all these names, but remember what I mentioned last night. We know what the Ahlul Bayt and the Quran have told us for a long time. Control your anger, control your emotions, control yourself, control your nafs. But we have not implemented it today. We still have issues of anger. We still have issues of not controlling the nafs. We still have issues of akhlaq. So now I'm saying, let's go to the next layer. How do you implement what the Ahlul Bayt have already told us? And the implementation mechanism needs to use what's going on in society today. Otherwise, what's the point? And otherwise, what's the benefit? Now, come to this. Teddy Roosevelt lost his mother and his wife on the same day. They both died on the same day. His wife was expecting, and his mother was coming to visit the family to help in the delivery. She got sick on the way, and her wife died in the delivery of the child. Now, this man lost both very important figures in his life in one day. It took him 1 year to recuperate. He had to go into the woods of New York and recuperate, and then he came back, and he says, I came back stronger than ever. But he has this one quotation that has helped a lot of people, which is the man in the arena. And this is how players like LeBron James and others who weren't able to deal with the pressure of being an athlete. For example, people used to criticize LeBron and still do for no reason. And he said that it wasn't until he read this that he realized that there are some people who are playing in the game of life and there's others who are just watching. And so what Roosevelt said, he gave this speech at the Sorbonne in Paris, at the University of Paris. It's also called the Sorbonne. This is where Dr. Ali Shariati got his PhD. So he said, look, the citizenship in a republic is the name of the speech. And the excerpt within it is called The Man in the Arena. It says, look, the credit does not belong to the one who is pointing the finger at the one who is in the arena, on the arena, who is trying. You know, if you imagine, you go to Barclays Center or wherever you go, you watch a game, there's people who are on the court and there's people who are in the stands. The same was going. I went to Italy, I went to Rome, and I saw the Colosseum. This has been going on in human nature for thousands of years. When you go there, there's a huge stadium and there's gladiators in the middle. So here's the question. Is the person on the stands or on the court who's playing in the game, the person who's the gladiator, does he or she care what the audience is saying? They may not even hear what's being said in the stands, in the nosebleeds. The person in the nosebleeds all the way in the back is shouting and yelling at LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or whoever the player is, or Messi or Ronaldo or whoever athlete you pick. And they don't even know they exist. The athlete doesn't even know that person exists. But everyone's focused on the athlete on the court. So what does Roosevelt say? Roosevelt says, the credit does not belong to the one who's standing and sitting in the sands and pointing his finger at the person who's on the court and saying, you could have done this better and you could have done that better. No, no, no. But the credit belongs to the one who is in the Maidan, the one who is in the court, on the court, the one who's in the gladiators arena and who is fighting. And Roosevelt says, and whose face is marred with sweat and blood and toil. And they are daring greatly because they're trying. Was that not what Imam Hussein alayhi salam was doing on the plains of Karbala? Everyone else is just watching. Imam Hussein is on the battlefield. Even though he only has 72 or a few more. But he only has a handful. But it didn't matter. Because we remember Imam Hussein today. The world doesn't remember others. The principle is stand for something and fight for something. One of my favorite quotations comes from Martin Luther King, the civil rights activist. He said, look, there may come a moment in your life that you are called to stand. And he says it much more eloquently than I can say, but I'm paraphrasing. He says, there may come a moment in your life where you are to make a stand about something, but you don't. Fear, something happens. And you don't stand up, and you don't speak, and you don't do what's right. He said, after that moment, if you don't do what's right, and you don't stand, and you don't make the right move, you may be living physically until 80 years old and breathing, but you are just as dead at that age as you were when you denied standing up for the truth and reality. You're a physical body, but you're dead because your spirit is dead. The same is true in the movement of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. He said, these are not people who are alive. What did Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt tell us? Mankind are an-nasu niyamun. That people are asleep. When they die, they wake up, for example. Or mutu qabla an tamutu. Die before you die. Meaning what? Have an awakening in your lifetime. Realize this. I mentioned this, some of the brothers may have remembered this, but I remind you this. This is a very true and powerful story, and then we'll transition into finding your calling. Look, I'm just laying the groundwork. Two brothers, roughly 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, in Europe. One brother is in France, not known, unknown. He is dying of illness in France. The other brother, his own brother, is not there. And he is very famous, and he is very wealthy. And so what happens as this other brother, who's not known, is dying of illness in the south of France, when he eventually dies, the other brother, who is famous and well known, he picks up the newspaper the next day. And when he picks up the newspaper the next day, he gets the shock of a lifetime. A shock that most of us never get while we're alive. He's reading something that will change his life forever. What does he read? He opens the paper, and it says on the front line head covers, the merchant of death has died. The merchant of death has died, and he begins to read and read and read and read. And he realizes that he is reading his own obituary after the newspapers made a mistake. They thought that the famous and wealthy brother died, and the one who was unknown was still living, because they blundered the names. The person who was reading the newspaper, his name was Alfred Nobel. He's the one who established a very famous prize that we know today. But he made his money from TNT, dynamite. He was a chemist. And he made a lot of money by selling this. But he didn't realize that the way that human beings will remember him on this planet is that he made money off of people's death. And after that, he endowed what we now call the Nobel Prize. Regret. He recognized, and he had a moment of how he'll be remembered. He regretted it, and he changed the narrative by focusing and giving his money towards a noble cause. And that's really what's really important. What is going to be written on your tombstone? What are people going to say when you pass away or I pass away? For many of us, I can't speak about you, but me, people may not even remember you after a week. A week is a long time, a few days. In New York, maybe a day or an hour, I don't know. But the reality of the matter is, do something to make humanity better. Do make something to make the world better. You have a gift that Allah has given you. Utilize that gift. I'll give you an example, and I'm making this personal because this may help people. People come to me from time to time wherever I go. They say, I'm having some challenges of mental health challenges, for example. And they'll say that, is this an azab from Allah? Like I'm going through depression or I'm having to take this medication. And I say, why? Why would you think that way? Allah, some of the people who were Allah's closest, they went through the biggest struggles. For example, Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh is the one who's called Nuh because he wails. He does buka. The examples of all of the prophets. Rasulullah himself had a whole year which they called Amul Huzn, the year of sorrow, when he lost Abu Talib and Lady Khadija. And numerous times you'll find throughout the lives of the closest people, they went through difficult challenges. So don't think that at all. Number one. Number two, I say this because my understanding, your understanding, our understanding here of what are considered mental health challenges may be very different than people who in another generation. They may think it's all downhill. But if I remind you that certain people, it's the biggest superpower in the world. So I'll give you my example. At 32, which was a few months ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety. I never knew I had it. And my whole life, I was living in a way that this was normal. But I realized it wasn't normal. But if I was encouraged, people said, well, you have a PhD, how is that possible? Well, that's not understanding the whole matter, because ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And one aspect that many people who have ADHD is called hyperfocus. If something is interesting to you, you can focus so much that nobody is able to compete with you. So for example, Michael Jordan is considered one very famous person who has ADHD. Another person who's very famous is considered to be Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin business group. Many other people. Why am I saying this? If I went by the traditional metrics of the community, it would be very difficult for me to fit in necessarily, because maybe I didn't go down that path. But the same thing that people ask me, how do you do this, is also my skill set that Allah has given me, my gift, which is the ability to remember a lot of books. A lot of people cannot do that. I realized that much later. That's a gift that Allah has given me. Because if something's interesting to me, it's hard for me to forget it. The other side is, public speaking comes a lot more natural to me than it comes to a lot of other people. I didn't realize this. As Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, says, when he was talking about this, the number one fear in America at that time was public speaking, and number two was death. He said that means if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. That's how afraid people are of public speaking. But when I see public speaking, what I realized was many people are very afraid of public speaking because they see individuals. I see individuals right now, but more important in my mind, because of big picture thinking, I see a whole nation, an ummah, a group. And so I'm not so concerned about individuals, I'm concerned about the consensus group. So that helps me in my gift. At the same time, it's important for you to recognize what is your gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your gift is unique. And it's not necessarily you have one gift. You may have several gifts. I want that our community can become such that in the future, we are able to help people identify their strengths and get them on the track to success much earlier than later. And then people will say, I need the Mambarga, I need the Masjid, I need the Husseiniya. Now, we'll stop here and we'll transition into our workshop about trying to find your calling. And I want you to grab a pen and a paper. I think the team here has them. They'll just distribute them around. But before you even start writing, just start thinking about this. If money wasn't an object, meaning your bills are all paid for, you have everything that you need in life, and you needed to figure out what job or what career, what will you do with the rest of your life? You don't need to work for money anymore. What would you do? What career would you pick? What job would you pick? What would you do? And if it's 2-3 things, write 2-3 things down. But the question is, if money was not an object and money is out of the equation, what would you dedicate your time to on this planet? Okay, so the other thing that I want to mention here is, while you're thinking about that and writing that, I want to mention that this is where our community can come in. So I'll use my other example, and this is just one example. You can think of thousands of other examples. I had a friend, when I told him about this book, A First-Rate Madness by Nassim Rami at Tufts, he said that for him it was definitely true. And he went to Harvard, and he had a certain mental health challenge, but he said, because of that, I went to Harvard, not in spite of that. So I want you to understand those things. So the other aspect that I want to mention is, for example, ADHD. People who have ADHD, they actually, some of them don't do as well in traditional education, but there are certain areas in life they do very well. For example, sports. For example, business. They estimate about 40 to 45% of the millionaires and billionaires in the world have ADHD in some form. So it's a perfect environment for someone who's an entrepreneur. But if you're, as Einstein says, everyone is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking it's an idiot. And the reality is, you just have to get the person in the right ecosystem. You just have to get them in the right environment. Some of the best athletes, for example, Michael Phelps, the best swimmer in the history of the world, as we know it right now, is very open about his ADHD. Some of the best authors, public speakers. The same is true for what I mentioned the other day, autism and Asperger's. Some of the biggest financial wizards on Wall Street down the way have Asperger's and some autism spectrum challenge. Why is that? We don't know, and we're still researching it, but something helps them. So what I'm trying to realize is, I'm trying to change the narrative in our communities from thinking, oh, mental health, the person's lost their mind. That's not true. In fact, it can be a superpower, but it's understanding how you challenge this. But there's other factors that people don't know about today. For example, how important is your diet? Now, if you like the food that you eat, close your ears for what I'm about to say. But believe me, the food that we eat is not only impacting our physical body, it's also ruining our mental state. And I'll give you the book. It's called Brain Energy by Dr. Christopher Palmer at Harvard University. And they're now looking at certain types of diets. I'm not giving a blanket statement on any diet or anything like that. Everyone has different specific needs. There's not one size fits all for medicine. I only told you there's only one size fits all is in diet and exercise, which most people don't want to do. But other than that, there's no one size fits all. But how can we have programs in our community that help everyone? One way is, you have a panel discussion. You have a doctor. If you're talking about mental health, a Maulana cannot talk about mental health comprehensively. It's not possible. You need a psychiatrist, you need a Maulana, you need an alim, you need a religious scholar, but you also need a psychiatrist, you also need a therapist, you also need a counselor, you also need a lawyer sometimes, because a lot of these deal with mental health things, deal with individual sovereignty. And you need to understand how to navigate the law. So these are all important, complicated matters. But alhamdulillah, we already have this talent in our communities. Why don't we utilize it? So this is something that's really, really important. So now, getting people in the right space, in the right domain. So that was the first question that I asked you. And I'm going to be more trying to get you to think, and then later I'll try to add in some more details. Now, do you guys remember, does anyone remember what is a Venn diagram from high school or middle school? Who remembers what a Venn diagram is? Okay, let me ask one of the sisters. Anyone know to tell us what a Venn diagram is? Overlapping circles, yeah? Like overlapping circles, yes, sister. Yeah, very good. So we're going to make not just two circles, we're going to make 4 circles, 4 overlapping circles. So you're going to make, it's not that complicated, just think about north, south, east, west, right? And in the middle, you'll want to have the intersection of them, right? So this technique is called Ikigai. It's a Japanese technique. So you want to make 4 circles, and in each one you're going to write something, and then you're going to find the intersection of them. So the first circle that I want you to write down is, what do you love? What do you love? So write down all of those things. Could be sports, could be, if sports, specific sports, it could be reading, art, you list it. You name it. List it, write it down. So as an example, for me, I started putting, like, when I was doing this the first time, I put economics, politics, philosophy, history, this, that, and the other. But there was a broader theme, and the broader theme was I just love learning about anything and everything. So for you, you may put specifics, but also try to think about what is the broad theme. That may help you a little bit. Another thing that I realized when I was doing this the first time was I did all of my education in math and science and engineering, but that was not my natural tilt at all. All of my interests were in social sciences. They were not in physical sciences, although I studied my whole life in physical sciences. So it's important, even realizing that is a big realization. So this is the first circle. The second circle is, what are you good at? Another way to think about this is, if you put the time and effort required, this is the second circle, if you put the time and effort required, what could you be the best in the world at? What could you be in the top percent of the world at, the top 10% of the world at, the top 1% of the world at, if you put the time and effort required? So again, I'll use my own example, but this is my example. You have your own gift that Allah has given you and gifts that Allah has given you. For me, if I put the time and effort, that means I got rid of all the distractions. Right now, I public speak on the side, as in some sense. My career has not been this predominantly. And so if I dedicated myself to public speaking, I could maybe be one of the best in the world, if I dedicated the time and effort and put all the work in. The same way a soccer player has natural talent, or a basketball player has natural talent, but you need to put the work in. I was just watching a video clip from Kobe Bryant, the basketball player. And when he scored 81 points, they said, did you feel like this was, how did you feel? He said, I felt very natural, because I knew I put so much work in, I put so much effort in during the summer that it felt natural to me. So what I'm asking you is the same. If you put the time and effort, what could you be the best in the world at, or one of the best in the world at, or top 5% in the world at? What are you good at? For some people, and you know these people and your friends, they can talk to anybody, they can talk to a wall, and they're very good at that. Some people can't talk to anybody. They don't like talking to people. Some people are very good at, big picture thinking. Some people are very good at microscopic details, very small details. Some people Allah's given a gift to everyone that's different and unique. And what's beautiful is there's only one you in the world. There's no other you. And that's one thing that Allah has made unique about you, alhamdulillah. So that's the second circle. The third circle is, what does the world need? What does the world need that you can provide, in some sense? Like, what does the world need that you can provide? So the world needs artists, it needs athletes, the world needs businessmen and women, business people, but the world needs economists, finance people, it needs all types of people, that there are needs that are there. It needs certain problems solved. For example, how do we get to Mars? How do we get to other planets? It needs, how do we solve climate change problems? How do we solve poverty problems? What does the world need? That's the third circle. And the fourth circle is, what would people pay you for? What would people pay you for? So I hope it's clear that I'm not telling you just follow your heart and do whatever you want. I'm telling you, I'm trying to get you to think practically, within reason. What would people pay you for? So I'll give you again my example. In the Islamic sphere, in the religious sphere, you don't do public speaking for the money, obviously. But outside this, speeches, very easily, just the most basic speaker gets paid $5,000 minimum, if not much more than that. And what I'm saying is, they need public speakers because very few people are willing to do that. And a lot of these conferences that happen in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and on the world, they need people to address the audience. As an example, I'm just giving you an example. There's thousands of other things. Today, with YouTube, with the internet, with social media, with AI, there's no limit to what you can do and achieve. So what would people pay you for? Now comes the interesting part, which is, what is the intersection of all four of them for you? Again, whenever I do this, I get the same things in the middle, which are professor, author, public speaker, consultant, coach, advisor, these types of things. For you, it will be different. It will be based on what is your mix of 4 answers. So what is it that keeps coming up that brings all 4 of those components together for you? How's everyone doing? Okay. Anyone got a answer? Okay, so let's go through this quickly one by one though. In the box or the circle, circle for what do you love? What did you guys put? What did you folks put? Yes. Okay, very good, very good. Religion, photography, speaking, leading, right? Very good. Uh, Anyone else want to share what they put for what do they love? Basketball, okay, fantastic. Very good. Designing, fantastic, excellent, excellent. Any particular type of designing or just in general? Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, all have yeah. Yeah, like this is very interesting. And you'll notice that the sister reminded me of something very interesting. Sometimes in your family, you'll notice these patterns if you do the investigation of someone had a natural talent for something that they didn't realize, or they found their calling and they became very good at it. So if I look at my own family, just generally speaking, my grandfather was an architect and he was actually really good at it. Like he was like profound. He ended up going to Cornell and then he was really good at it in like that was him, not me. I didn't. I had nothing to do with that, and I didn't get any of those genes. And then I had an uncle who played professional cricket for India. Like he was pretty good at that. And then I had another uncle of mine who was a rocket scientist at Harvard. I'm sorry, Oxford. So he was a pretty sharp guy. But they found their niche. They found their thing, and that's when they excelled, right? And so the whole goal of this is to help people find their niche, their real thing. So that's really important. So and architecture has a big philosophy behind it. But try to think of these patterns. But just because someone was in one line doesn't mean that's necessarily you. Because you also have to consider the genes from the other side of the family as well. And your also environment. So those are important patterns to recognize. Thank you for sharing that. Brother, you had something in the back, yes? Parachute jumping. Okay, fantastic. Okay, that's fantastic. So that's huge. Like, for some people, there's a lot of, I think it speaks for itself. Very good, very good. Anyone else? Excuse me. Some people love planes, airports, like stuff like that. Aviation, very good. Okay, yeah. Group work. Why? So you can pass it on to other people, or so you can divide? No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Teamwork, right? Like this is very important, by the way. This is a super important question. I'm only half joking. Some people they really, really prefer working by themselves. They don't want to work with other people, and it's a nightmare for them to work with other people. Because if they work with other people, like some people, and by the way, there's some types of these people who are very good on Wall Street, who are individual investors, and it would be a disaster if they worked with anyone. Other people, they work much better with a team. So it's very important to recognize that. So I'll give you one example. One guy, his name is Monish Pabrai. Monish Pabrai has written a book called The Dhando Investor. He's an Indian guy. And he's modeled it, Warren Buffett has an annual fundraiser for lunch with him. And he won it one of the years. And so they asked him, how did you get into investing? He said, look, I was a successful entrepreneur and I had a business, but and this is very important as I'm mentioning entrepreneurship, there may be a point where you love entrepreneurship and then you start hating it. And it's important to keep that in mind as well. The same way a lot of people I know, a lot of my friends, they got into real estate to have more time. And now that they've gotten into real estate for having more time, they forgot what their original goal was, and now they have no time. You have to keep what your goals are in mind and never forget them. And so it's very important to keep that in mind, number one. So So when this comes up, when it's coming to choosing what you're doing with your career, you need to be able to channel these things and bring them together so that you make the right decision in your career. So for some people it's sports, for some people it's medicine, for some people it's big picture, for some people it's small picture. But Monish Pabrai said he hated his job now. When he started the company, he loved it. But by that time he hated it. Why? Because he said, now I'm the CEO of the company and I have 200 employees under me, and I'm an adult daycare. Basically I'm just solving people's problems. I don't like doing that. I'm basically sitting in my office and someone tells me they have this problem and that problem, and I'm basically paying psychiatrists for them. I hate it. So he hired someone named Jack Sheen, who I've spoken to, who lives in Maryland actually, and he's written some interesting books which I recommend you check out. And not everyone has the money and budget for this, but he spent $10,000 because that guy, Jack Sheen, Jack Sheen is an executive coach, and he spent 3 months and did a personal profile based on his personality, and he found that, Monish, you're in the wrong career. You love competition, but you love individual competition. You love sports like golf or tennis, individual sports, swimming, not sports that have to do with teams, because you hate the bureaucracy. And so he thought about it and he said, you know what, I really like Wall Street and investing. And now he's done extremely well in that space. So another thing that I would recommend to you is to do personality tests. Don't just do them once. And please don't just do Myers-Briggs, because Myers-Briggs is a disaster. If you read the science of it, it's very unscientific. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying if you do it with a grain of salt, because most people, when they do Myers-Briggs, it changes for them over time. Because I read a whole book on it. Trust me on this one. There's other models you can do. The Ocean test, the Golden Personality test. If you go to Wall Street, most of these companies will have you do personality tests to understand what are your strengths and weaknesses. By the way, keep something in mind. If something is a weakness, you can always work on your weakness and improve it and make it a strength. Don't think that it's not possible. But what I'm trying to encourage you to do is take those strengths and put them together. Okay, let's go to the next one. What is it that you could be the best in the world at? Or what are you good at? Anyone? And don't be humble here, remember. What I mean is, what did Yusuf say in the Quran? When they asked Yusuf, what job should we give you? He said, make me finance minister. I'm good with numbers. Was he being arrogant? No, he was just saying, this is what I'm good at. Or you can find numerous other examples within this. Sulaiman said to Allah, Ya Allah, give me a kingdom. That's the biggest kingdom in history. Was Sulaiman being arrogant? No, he's saying, look, I want to do something good. Allah, give me the ability to do something good, to rule over the animals and the humans. He said, I feel like I'm a good leader. He's telling Allah, and Allah gave him that power. So what I'm saying is, ask yourself honestly, what is it that you could be good at, or you are naturally good at, and your friends tell you and people tell you you're good at? What is it? Anyone? Big ideas. Very good. Absolutely. And this is a really good, big ideas. Now, oftentimes you'll find this pattern where people who have big ideas, they may be the visionaries or the dreamers, and you need those. But oftentimes those same people are not the implementers. These are two different categories of people. You need a visionary, and you need that person to be paired with a implementer. Example, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, Apple. Steve Jobs was the visionary, but he didn't create the technology. Steve Wozniak is the one who did the computer engineering part. So you need these two groups to come together. So it's very important. Very good. Anyone else? Teaching, fantastic, beautiful, okay. Teaching, excellent. Behind the scenes, planning and organizing, very good. Behind the scenes, so that's important. Yeah. Yes. Yes, and this is a different personality quirk, right? Some people, they'll do everything, but they don't want any attention on them, for example. But there's other people, they don't want to do anything, they want all the attention. That's great, you fit those people together. By the way, teaching is a beautiful one, because personally, I've always gravitated towards teaching as well. In fact, Jack Sheen, the guy I mentioned, who Monish Pabrai hired, I spoke to him on the phone. He said, you're a born teacher, like through and through. But teaching is not just K through 12 teaching. Teaching is also university teaching. Teaching is also, any leader needs to be a teacher. A leader, what are the prophets doing? What were they doing? They were explaining and teaching people and leading them in a particular direction. So if you can teach, you can also lead. And if you can lead, you can be an entrepreneur, CEO, you name it. So teacher, don't just think teacher means, oh, my pre-K teacher, right? Which is very important, by the way. But teacher has a much vaster meaning. It's the ability to understand a concept and explain it to others. Have you ever heard of the Michael Jordan syndrome? So why don't very good athletes make very good coaches? Most very good athletes are very bad coaches. For example, Michael Jordan, not a very good coach, not a very good GM, not a very good president, but an extremely good player. So Michael Jordan syndrome is when you're very good at something, it comes natural to you, or you've worked so hard it's now natural, it's very difficult for you to explain it to others because you don't know how to break it down anymore. So the people who make the best coaches are usually middle or lower level players. And that's where it's really important to see the whole picture. So you need these types of people. The same is true for the geniuses of society often don't become the wealthiest people. It's the people who know how to keep the team together and bring the team together and build it. Example is Jim Simmons. Example is Citadel. Citadel is a company that did the best on Wall Street this last year in 2022. Ken Griffin, who now Harvard has he donated $300 billion to Harvard, and now Harvard has the whole arts and sciences school is named after him now. He doesn't make these decisions by himself. He has hired people who are much smarter, and he brings them together. And as Steve Jobs said, what does he do? He runs the orchestra. He conducts the orchestra. He helps people come to a common term. So that's another. Anyone else want to share what they're good at? I know we're running each on time. Yes, sister. Yeah, and then we'll go to others. Yeah. Wow, fascinating. So there's so much there, amazing. But sales is one thing that just came to my mind. Sometimes people get the wrong connotation of sales. Sales is one of the most valuable things in life, period. The Prophet himself was a salesman. The Prophet was a tradesman. The Prophet, Rasulullah himself, it's well known, and he was very innovative in his approach. He was so successful in business that people said that they wanted to do business with him. He would come back with 3 times the profit as anyone else. And on top of that, people would say they wanted to do business with him again. Because he had one thing that's the most valuable thing in sales, which is authenticity. Yeah, exactly, honesty, 100%. So he's totally honest and transparent. But what a good salesperson is a good person, is actually a very good communicator. You need to be able to communicate to people in their language, their understanding. To understand what are their problems, how can you help solve their problems? And it's a very, one of my mentors said, if you want to boil all of business down, it boils down to one word, sales. What is it that you want to sell? And every billionaire that you will find, they have this skill set. There's not a single billionaire that doesn't have it. And the reason is because at that level, you're trying to you're influencing people to move. Rasulullah was a master craftsman at this because he knew how to communicate with people's hearts and minds. It's very important to develop that. So knowing that, you can go way further. I know with my engineering friends, we used to talk about this all the time. Siemens, which was the technology company, the German company, people would solve the biggest mathematical problems to build their wind turbine engines, and they'd get paid maybe 150, 200,000. And the person who doesn't know anything about that language of mathematics and solving those problems would get paid $1 million for just selling that product. Of course, with ethics and principles. If you do it honestly and people trust you, they will come to you. And you won't have to go to people. But you have to build a reputation for that. So anyways, long tangent. Sister, I think you had your hand up as well, yes? Writing poem, excellent, fantastic. This is something that especially as the world progresses, it's going to need more and more of. As the technical skills become more ubiquitous and more common, you're going to need people who are more in touch with the human skills of reality. Who do we still talk about in our world today? We still talk about Shakespeare. We still talk about Rumi. We still talk about Attar. We still talk about, Khalil Gibran. You go down the list, it's many of these poets who have transcended time in many respects. So that's a very important skill too. In fact, I mentioned this in the Julus, if some of you were there. Satya Nadella says on a public forum that he gets inspiration from Ghalib, the poet. Like a head of the biggest tech company in the world is saying, I'm getting inspiration from Urdu poetry. Because, in particular, he said the verse was, Hazaron khwahish aisi ki har khwahish pe dam nikle. He says, my interpretation of this line changes every day. He says this. He said this on an open platform. And so read his book, Refresh. It's a very good book. So what I remind you is, when things become ubiquitous, such as social media, technology, and others, you have to find a way of thinking divergently, in a different way. And that's important to know. So keep those things in mind. Anyone else want to share that? Let's go to the next circle if no one else wants. What's the next one? What does the world need? Exactly. What does the world need? What problems does the world need solved that you can help with? The world needs education. Absolutely needs education. Moral values. Absolutely. Management. Oh, absolutely. Like, how many people would pay right now to have someone else manage something, right? Because they're really afraid of, like, they don't like. Oh, very good. Yes. This is one of the biggest. There's a book I recommend you read. It's called Le Suicide, which literally means suicide. It was written in 1897 by Emile Durkheim, Dr. Emile Durkheim. He was a professor at the Sorbonne, same university as Dr. Ali Shariati, same one where Roosevelt spoke. And what did he say in that one? He said he was looking at Europe, and Europe in 1897, so this is 126 years ago, the same problem that we're facing today was going on then. He noticed that Europe was switching from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy. And so he looked at Italy, Holland, England. He looked at Italy, England, and Holland. At that time, the most agricultural economy was Italy. The middle was England. It was partly industrial, partly agricultural. And the most developed economy at that time was actually Holland or Netherlands. You know, the stock market, we got it from the Dutch, from Holland, right? So, but he looked at something that he recognized at that time, which is still true today. And what did he notice was, as industrialization increases, the suicide rate in society increases. And he was shocked. So Italy had the lowest rate, Holland had the highest rate. And this is still true today. If you go to Korea and Japan and all of these places, wherever there has been industrialization expansion, people have lost a sense of meaning. That's where you need coaches, therapists, advisors to help people answer these big questions of life. Because freedom is double-edged. There's a book that I invite you to read, it's called The Paradox of Choice. And in that, Dr. Schwartz says, in The Paradox of Choice, is it better to have too much choices or not? Now, in one sense, freedom is very good, but there's a cost to it. So he sent two groups into the supermarket. One group, he said, look, I want you to pick between these 4 cereal brands. You know cereals, breakfast cereals, that you may have in Sari or something like that? Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Cheerios, whatever you're having. Cornflakes, yeah. Cornflakes. There's an interesting story about cornflakes that I'll tell you later another time. It was created by the Adventist Church for other reasons. We'll talk about that another time. Cool. So anyways, so that's one side. And then they told another group, Group B, pick between these 20 cereal brands. And after that, they asked them, how many of you are satisfied with your choice in Group A and in Group B? Group A, they all said we're satisfied and happy with our choice out of 4. And Group B, who picked out of 20, all of them said if we had more time, we'd pick something else. But this is not just about cereal, this is about life. Disney tells you the same thing. There's one person who you are meant to marry who lives somewhere in Scandinavia, and you have to find them. When in reality, that person could be down the street and someone that your families know. But you think that that perfect person is out there, when in reality, this happens in every aspect of our life. So we have lost a sense of meaning, and you need people to help you, guide you on that way. That's why we're having this type of conversation. That's why this title of this workshop has more attendance than many of the other lectures. Because the reality is in society, and online as well, because we don't have good answers to these in societies, and you need people to help on this path. Anyways, and the last one, what would people pay you for? Nothing? Services? Yeah, what type of services? Yeah, like what is it that you could do that people will pay you for? Like it would be a payment is just an exchange of value, right? In the past, they used to have the barter system, right? Barter system was, if I have a bread and you have cheese, and I need cheese and you need bread, I'd slice my bread, give you bread, you give me cheese, and we barter, we exchange. But today, We have currency. So it's exchange of value. Yeah. Okay, very cool. Okay, so see, look, they're public speaking on different on mental health, religion, and I'm sure you may even find more topics about that. Very good. Anyone else? Project management? Yeah, definitely need project managers for sure. Absolutely. I have a PMP, by the way, so I know that. I never used. I mean, I used it a little bit, but I was a good test taker. And what I'm telling you is, I'm telling you this because I hated project management, to be honest with you, but I did it because that was the need. And I'm trying to help you break away and figure out what is your passion and what is the thing that you're really good at. Okay. Anyone find what was in the middle? This is the most important, the intersection of all of them. Anyone found a few things there? La ilaha illallah. La. I'll recite Fatiha for your careers tonight, inshallah. I'm joking. Sorry. Yes, sister. What writing? What did you say before writing, sorry? Writing? Oh, fantastic. Wow. So like something that comes to mind is poetry for kids, like children's poetry books, for example, which are super important. Like I'm a parent now myself, and I'm trying to figure out like good content for my kids. There's certain principles that you need to know at a very young age. For example, how to fight pessimism, how to fight negativity, how to realize that things can be amazing, so this is very important. You can inspire people through poetry, right? The whole lecture series I've been talking about Iqbal as a poet, right? Now, Iqbal himself, he was very intelligent, because he knew he could have wrote books, but he knew that nobody's going to read his books. And he knew that people love poetry, especially in the subcontinent. So he said, how do I get people to resonate with my ideas? So he used poetry as a vehicle. So sometimes it's very, very important medium. In fact, what does the Quran say about poetry, right? Surah Shu'ara, the last four verses, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالشُّعَرَى يَتَّبِهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّهُمْ فِي كُلِّ وَادٍ يَحِمُونَ وَأَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُونَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا وَانْتَصَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مَنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Allah says, وَالشُّعَرَى يَتَّبِهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ. Only the people who follow the poets, they've gone astray. But don't get up and leave until I explain all of this, right? Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong interpretation. I said, only those who have gone astray, they follow the poets. Why do they go around in these valleys? They go from one valley to another without any meaning. There's no meaning and purpose in their poetry. They talk about this and they talk about that. It's purposeless. And why do they say that which they do not do? So Allah is saying there's a complex between what they say and what they do. There's a conflict. So there's munafiqah. There's a sense of hypocrisy between what they say and what they do. And maybe they also don't write what they actually do. There's a conflict both ways. So now, but then Allah gives a very important exception. He says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, except for those who have iman, who have belief. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and they do good deeds. وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا, and they use Allah's name in abundance. وَانْتَصَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا, and those who write after having been oppressed, after dhulm has been done. So on the basis, why do we have Marsiya, why do we have Noha, why do we have all these? On the basis of who has had more dhulm done on them than Ahlul Bayt, number one. And are they not the ones who believe in Allah? Of course, the foremost they invite us to. Are they not the ones who, for example, at every level in time, they are doing the good actions? Amal Salat, obviously. And they use Allah's name in abundance? Absolutely. So poets, even Islam and Allah understood that poetry is a very good vehicle and powerful if it's used the right way. Beautiful. Hassan. Yes, brother. You had something? Did you? I was going to say, at the intersection? Yes, that's huge. That's very, putting on these events, need people to plan it, host it, event, and bring people together. But that's not only limited to that, by the way. The opportunities that open up from event planner and event organizer is also a big thing about investment, like private equity and venture capital and things of that nature, because you're bringing together not only the resource talent, but you're also bringing in the people that can make this successful. So the ability to bring people together to do something is a huge skill set. And that's what I want you guys to think about, that this is just the starting point of opportunities. Now the next level is the three areas of what you know, what you know you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know. So if you think that teacher is just the pre-K teacher in your village, which is still a very, very important role, but you don't realize that also being a teacher is someone who's the president of a country, then you may be missing the whole big picture. So what I want you to now think about is, how many different areas can you apply this? And one way you can do this is called mind mapping. We don't have time to cover this right now because we're out of time, but mind mapping is something that we can talk about next time, that is a beautiful way for you to figure out and expand on the things that you already know, to also understand what you don't know and go further with that, inshallah. So we'll close here. Any final questions, comments, concerns? Are you leaving with more questions than answers maybe? Or has anyone got any clarity or any help on that? Any final questions, comments, concerns? I'll be here for the next few, I'll be here for tomorrow, and then inshallah I'm leaving on Thursday, but you can feel free to ask me any questions in between, and I'm here. But hopefully this is the start of something, and hopefully the leaders and management here take it on afterwards to have more workshops. Hopefully you can go home and do some personality tests, such as the Golden Personality Test and the Ocean Personality Test, to get some more insights on your own personality, and then you can build up, and we can help the next generation also identify their skill sets for the future, so we can build a strong community, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala rasul kareem wa ala ahli bayt at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
وتوجه زالت. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة، وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي الباكر، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي الجواد التكي، وعلي بن محمد الهادي النكي، والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي، يا صاحب العصر والزمان، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل.
Brothers and sisters, there's snacks in the back if you guys want to take some home, please. Otherwise, I'm going to have to eat it for Sari. I'm going to have diabetes.
The business 9:30, same time at same place.
As well as we're going to have a entrepreneurship workshop tomorrow around 9:30, around the same time, the same place. We'll be happy to have you here tomorrow again. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.